And we're back like we never left. Oregon fans, what's going on? How we living? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast, your premier podcast for all things Oregon football and Oregon football recruiting. Just in case you're new here, I'm your host, Max Torres, publisher and lead editor of Ducks Digest, covering the Oregon Ducks over on Fan Nation, part of the Sports Illustrated Network. Man, we got a big episode in store for you guys today. We are doing a reaction and analysis podcast breaking down Oregon's 81-7 season opening week 1 victory over the Portland State Vikings on Saturday in Eugene at Autzen Stadium. What a way to start the 2023 season. Year 2 of Dan Lanning, the start of the Bo Nix Heisman campaign. We're going to get into all of that and more in today's episode. We're coming to you live on a couple different spots on YouTube at Oregon Football Max Torres, on Twitter at mtorres sports, and on the Ducks Digest Facebook page. So if you guys are here in the live chat on any of those platforms, thank you so much for tuning in, and go ahead and let me know your thoughts on Oregon's week 1 victory over Portland State, and maybe throw a question or two my way. Love to do the mailbag stuff. Already got one in the chat, so glad to have you guys along. A quick programming note before we get into the week 1 win for Oregon. It is decision day for 2024 Yelm Washington linebacker Braden Platt. He is a major target for the Oregon Ducks on the recruiting trail. He's set to announce his college commitment at 5:30 p.m. Pacific time over on the 247 Sports YouTube page. So if you guys love Oregon recruiting, make sure you guys tune in to that decision. I have my pick on Oregon for Braden Platt, and I talked about that on my last hit on Fox Sports Eugene over the weekend. So just in case any of you guys missed out on that one, looks like it should be some good news coming for the Ducks later on Monday evening, as Braden Platt is set to announce between Oregon and the Oklahoma Sooners. So plenty of stuff to talk about on the recruiting trail, as the Ducks currently sit at 22 verbal commitments here in the 2024 class. So kind of a couple of things, lots of things, I should say, that we can talk about on today's episode. Going to get into a little bit of offensive talk, a little bit of defensive talk, and then maybe some big picture, and we'll get into some mailbag as well, as the Ducks will start to turn the page from the Portland State win to week 2 in Lubbock, when they travel to the Lone Star State to face former Oregon quarterback Tyler Shuck and the Texas Tech Red Raiders, who lost in their week 1 game to the Wyoming Cowboys. How's that for a development? So seeing some of these questions here in the chat, I'll go ahead and star them and do the best I can to get to them later on in today's live show. But as you guys always know, if you want to get your question pushed to the top of the priority list, you can do so with a super chat, which supports the channel, and I always greatly appreciate that. So with that being said, 81-7 win for the Oregon Ducks to kick off the 2023 season. And I'd say it was a statement game, but at the same time, it was just an FCS opponent. So you really can't make too much from an FCS opponent. You can't make too big of a claim, or we still don't know a whole lot about this team, as odd as that sounds after playing in week 1 game. But we're going to get into some of the top offensive performances that we saw from the Ducks in week 1. And when we're talking about the offense, how can we not start with Bo Nix, who finished the day 23 for 27, throwing for 287 yards and 3 touchdowns. But get this, his longest play of the day was only 33 yards, and he actually didn't register a carry or register a rush, which is interesting. But at the same time, I think that's kind of what you wanted to see. You didn't want to see him being overly exerted. You didn't want to see them putting him in harm's way on the ground with a big week 2 game against Texas Tech. But I will say, for you guys that like to watch the show and listen in, I think I was pretty darn close to predicting Bo Nix's exact stat line on our previewing and predicting show last week with Zach Neal of Ducks Wire. I think I predicted somewhere in the neighborhood of 22 for 26 for 270 and 3 touchdowns. I might have said 4. So maybe not exactly on the mark, but pretty darn close, and got to give myself a little bit of a pat on the back for that one. But Bo Nix did what we expected to see from Bo Nix. He had complete control, complete command of the offense. He took care of the ball. He got the ball to the playmakers, and I think that's all you can really ask for from any quarterback. But really, it's not much of a story with Bo Nix in his season debut with the Ducks in 2023, just doing what we expected Bo Nix to do. And maybe that'll be a theme for this season. I think we're definitely going to see him run a lot more, certainly in the Texas Tech game, which I'm kind of getting to one of those mailbag questions. But I think really Bo Nix doesn't need to be a superhero. And I think that was one of the big lessons that he probably learned in his first year after transferring from Auburn last season. I think Kenny Dillingham sat him down and said, hey, man, you were playing a bunch of hero ball over there in the SEC, and we don't need you to do that here. We just need you to be calm, be poised, get the ball to these stud playmakers that we have. That was his whole saying last year, right? Feed the studs. And there are plenty of studs on this Oregon team. So Bo Nix had a great day. Don't need to dedicate too much time to it, but certainly great to see the Oregon quarterback have an awesome debut in 2023 as the Ducks got off to a really quick start in this one. And they actually went into the half leading by a score of 50-7. So can't ask for much more than that if you're looking for a hot start. And now we got to talk a little bit about Ty Thompson, just on the topic of quarterbacks, right? Ty Thompson, I saw that someone asked, hey, Max, can you hit on this in the podcast? And I said, absolutely, we got to hit on him. Look at Ty Thompson finishing the day 7 for 8, 81 yards, and a touchdown. Longest play of the day was for 21 yards. And let's see, he also had 2 rushes for 25 yards. So pretty solid day for Ty Thompson. I think I will say you didn't see anything amazing from Ty Thompson, but he did look pretty good. And I think that similar to what I said about Bo Nix, you kind of saw what you expected from him. I think that we did kind of see what we expected to see from Ty Thompson in this game against Portland State. He has historically in his college career played pretty well against lower level opponents, and that's what the Portland State Vikings were. So I think that you got what you wanted from Ty Thompson. He operated the offense, he moved the ball down the field, and he led his team into the end zone on a scoring drive. So I think that that's exactly what you want to see from Ty. I thought he looked poised. I thought he had good command. He looked confident running the ball. And that's really what you want to see from him in 2023. You want to see him be confident. You want to see him be poised, see him be collected. That's really what you want to see from your quarterback, because that's what we want to see from Ty Thompson to show us that he can be the guy in 2024, because that's exactly what he wants to do. He's probably looking down the line a little bit at 2024 saying, hey, that's my time. I'm the next quarterback after Bo Nix. I'm the guy to follow in his footsteps, because I stuck around when so many other quarterbacks probably would have transferred. I stuck around when there were all these different offensive coordinators coming through Eugene. And I think that that's really a testament to his character and his mindset and willingness to just stick things out and get better with this team in 2024. So this was kind of the first audition, I guess you could say, in the 2023 season for Ty Thompson to show that he can be the guy in 2024. So I loved what I saw from him. I thought it was good. I'm not going to make too much of it. I want to see what he's going to be able to do against Hawaii, because even though that is a lower opponent, that's still a Power 5 opponent that is going to have a better roster in all likelihood compared to Portland State, who we saw on Saturday. So Ty Thompson, liked what I saw from him. Pretty much an error-free game, at least from a stats standpoint. Only thing you could have asked for is that he go 8 for 8. So super efficient, and I love what I saw from Ty Thompson. Now it really turns into what can he do against Hawaii in a couple of weeks when the Ducks return to Autzen Stadium. Hopefully they're coming off a win over Texas Tech in Lubbock. All right, we talked about the quarterbacks a little bit. Now let's talk about some of the wide receivers, the guys that were catching passes from Bo Nix and Ty Thompson all day. We also saw Austin Novosad. He only threw 3 passes, but he was 3 for 3 for 13 yards. And I thought he looked good in the limited snaps that he got against Portland State. But let's talk about the wide receivers, because they had themselves a heck of a day, accounting for 4 touchdowns and 381 receiving yards. 246 of those receiving yards came after these guys made the catch. So I think that is one of the best takeaways from what we saw from Oregon's offense, from Oregon's wide receivers against Portland State. What these guys were able to do after they caught the ball, they were definitely some playmakers. Troy Franklin stole the show. He caught 7 of his 9 targets for 106 yards and 2 touchdowns. And that's what we expected. Troy Franklin got off to a hot start. He's on the Biletnikoff Award watch list for a reason. You saw him kind of get skinny and just turn on the jets for his first touchdown. And in his second touchdown, he kind of lowered that shoulder a little bit and showed that he'd been in the weight room a lot this offseason. Love that physical nastiness that we saw from Troy Franklin in that game against Portland State. So he really did what we expected to do. Not really that surprised with what we saw from Troy Franklin in week 1 for the Ducks. But we did get our first good look at some of these new transfer wide receivers, which is really one of the storylines of this team. The group that they were able to bring in the transfer portal to bolster the wide receiving core. Really the only guy you lose from a year ago is Chase Cota, who's been doing his thing in the NFL ranks for the Detroit Lions. And one of their new wide receivers, one of those transfers, made an impact in this game. I'm talking about Gary Bryant Jr., the USC wide receiver transfer. I was talking to some people around this program, around Eugene, this offseason, this summer, and they were saying Gary Bryant's a dude. He's going to be special. And that's exactly what we saw in week 1. Granted, again, really for all of these takes and all this analysis, it's just Portland State, but we can still be excited about what we saw from this team in a couple of different ways. I know I'm seeing some comments about the defense, and we will make sure to get to that later on in today's show. But Gary Bryant Jr. caught all 7 of his targets for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns of his own. I saw the stat somewhere, but I can't remember exactly what it was. This is the first time in a while that Oregon has had 2 wide receivers register 100-yard games. So that's definitely a great development. He's going to be special. Wide receiver Gary Bryant is going to be special for the Ducks, and I think he is just one of many talented playmakers in that room. We also saw a little bit of Tez Johnson. Didn't make a massive impact, but hey, he caught all 3 of the balls that were thrown his way for 41 yards. His longest catch of the day was for 28 yards, and he also took a hit over the middle pretty well, which I think is definitely great because that was kind of the concern that I had, along with a lot of other people, I'm sure, is just how is his body going to hold up to the wear and tear of being a smaller wide receiver and taking some of those hits over the middle and just taking hits all the time. So love what I saw from some of these new guys. Gary Bryant Jr. catching one in the corner of the end zone. That was exciting. Tez Johnson did his thing. And then Trayshawn Holden caught 2 of his 3 targets for 17 yards on the day. And we didn't see Chris Hudson register a catch in this one. As one of the questions is asked here, where is Chris Hudson? He didn't register any catches in this one. But we did see, like I said, Trayshawn Holden, not a whole lot of impact in this one. He definitely was kind of trailing guys like Troy Franklin and Gary Bryant Jr., but just excited that he was out there and getting used to this offense and getting comfortable. One of the guys that we have to talk about is Kyler Casper, who didn't register any stats, but he had what looked to be a really impressive touchdown grab in this game that they ruled he didn't have control of the ball before he went out of bounds, I believe, or through contact. So think it looks like he kind of got robbed of a touchdown there, but excited to see Kyler Casper get involved here. I think one of the great takeaways from this game is that the Ducks were able to distribute the ball really well. I mean, let's see how many guys registered receptions. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 different guys caught passes for Oregon, and they're not all receivers. You had Terrence Ferguson, who chipped in 3 catches for 26 yards. You also saw Patrick Herbert catch a ball for 23 yards. Not a big day for the tight ends, but like I said, distributing the ball. Kenyon Sadiq also had a touchdown and dove for the pylon, but wasn't able to ultimately come away with a touchdown there. So you like what you saw from the tight ends. You like what you saw from the wide receivers. I think you just had a really good balanced attack for the Oregon offense that I think really, really helped the Ducks come away with this historic win, setting a modern franchise record with 81 points scored in this one. I think my prediction was something along the lines of 62-13, and they blew that one out of the water. Dan Lanning opening his post-game press conference saying, I think the Ducks is still doing push-ups. Just speaks to the crazy day the Ducks had on offense against Portland State, going absolutely wild. So we talked a little bit so far about the quarterback play. We talked about the wide receiver play. And now we're going to talk about those running backs. Sipping on a Fresca sparkling soda water. Do you guys like Fresca? Let me know in the comments. I went to see my grandma a little bit ago for her birthday, and she said, hey, you want some Fresca? I'm not going to drink this. So I said, hey, I'm not going to turn away some Fresca. Good stuff. Not sponsoring the show, but hey. So let's get back into it, talking about the running backs here for Oregon and their 81-7 win over Portland State. The Ducks had a dominant day on the ground, running the ball, 34 carries for 348 yards, 7 touchdowns. Longest run of the day was Bucky Irving's 56-yarder. And get this, the Ducks averaged 10.2 yards per carry, which is an insane number. Again, it's just Portland State, but you got to love those numbers. Bucky Irving led the way for Oregon, and he only touched the ball 4 times. 4 carries for 119 yards and 2 touchdowns on the day with a ridiculous 29.8 yards per rush. And so, like I said, 2 touchdowns. And then Jordan James. I think Jordan James might have been one of the biggest talking points of Oregon's day on the ground in week 1. 10 carries for 86 yards and 3 touchdowns, averaged 8.6 yards per carry. And why is this an exciting development? Well, he's really looking like he's ready to take on a bigger role in 2023 and maybe beyond, right? I've talked a lot about how I think Bucky Irving and Noah Whittington are going to head to the NFL after this year, and Jordan James would become the de facto RB1 for the Ducks and Carlos Lachlan in 2024. So this is absolutely, without a doubt, his best game as a Duck in his true sophomore season. He was kind of Oregon's 3rd running back, RB3, short down yardage, goal line back in 2022. And Lachlan said he's going to be having a bigger role this year for the Ducks, even though he thought that the short yardage role was kind of a big usage for him in his true freshman season coming out of the state of Tennessee. So Jordan James, I think I just like the toughness that kid runs with, man. I mean, the touchdown that he had sweeping out to the right where Jackson Powers Johnson was like falling in and pulling him in. I just like the toughness that he runs with and his ability to find the end zone and just the determination that he runs with. He is going to be a special one for Oregon in this just absolutely crazy loaded backfield that the Ducks have once again in 23 under Carlos Lachlan, who got named one of the top assistant coaches in all of college football. So Carlos Lachlan is absolutely an asset for this Oregon coaching staff, and he continues to just do a great job with these running backs as they just put on a show. And one of the other storylines that kind of caught a lot of people by surprise, we didn't really see too much of Noah Whittington. I know that other reporters were saying that they didn't see him at all in this game, but he was listed on Oregon's participation chart, I believe. Or was he? I'm looking at it right now, and he's wearing number 2 this year on offense, I think. Let me double check, because basically we didn't see much of Noah Whittington this year. He's wearing number 6. He's wearing number 6 this year. That's right. So that was kind of a shock that we really didn't see a whole lot of Noah Whittington. He didn't register a carry. Here we go. We got a comment from Andy saying Whittington got rocked on the opening special teams play and never came back in. Dan Lanning was asked about him after the game and really didn't say a whole lot, kind of just paraphrasing here, but talking about how he's just saying, I'm not going to talk about guys that didn't play today, which is an interesting development because he's just always been buttoned up, right? That's kind of where things have been with Dan Lanning lately. Just it's hard for reporters to get a whole lot out of Dan Lanning in these press conferences, and that's definitely the trend that we have seen this offseason. Okay, so he was asked about Noah Whittington, and Lanning said, I'm not going to talk about anybody that didn't play today, but Noah does everything right for us. He's doing a good job. We're just going to be smart with our players. So not a huge update, not a lot from Lanning, but like we talked about, and there's a comment here, probably smart to not use all of our weapons. I heard he was out stretching. That's what Hot Dog Sauce says. I'm not super concerned about this. I think if any guy was close to not being good to go, I don't think that the Oregon staff was going to push it. We also didn't see any of Nishad Strother, the East Carolina offensive line transfer. We didn't see any of Justin Jacobs, the new linebacker who transferred in from Iowa. So just important to keep these guys ready to go for Texas Tech. So it would have been fun to see Noah Whittington, but Jordan James stepping up the way he did, I think really is good to see. So I think that there were some other reporters that were saying they might have seen him really early on in the game, but that's just one of the topics here. Just what are we going to see from Noah Whittington in his 2023 debut? It looks like it will probably come against Texas Tech. Lanning is supposed to meet with reporters this evening, and I'm sure he's going to be asked about Noah Whittington, but probably not too much to say there. We'll have to see if he is out at practice for the Ducks on Tuesday when they have their first practice that should be open to the media for Texas Tech Week. So it was a bit of a surprise to not see Noah Whittington, but that was definitely I don't think it's that big of a deal just because of how they did, and I think he should be all right. So don't want to insinuate too much there. I don't have any inside information on Noah Whittington's availability, but my expectation is that we're going to see him on Saturday when the Ducks face Texas Tech. All right, rolling right along here on a beautiful Monday afternoon. We're here in the live stream on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Got a lot of folks here in the live chat. So let me know what you guys think about Oregon's Week 1 win over Portland State, and maybe throw a question my way for some mailbag. But we're going to be getting into Oregon's defense in the season opening win over the Vikings. I know a lot of people had some stuff to say there. The yards of offense comparatively was absolutely insane. Oregon outgained Portland State 729 to just 200 total yards for the Vikings offense on the day. So I'm going to talk about a couple of the stats, the key stats that stood out for me, and we'll kind of go from there. How's that sound? One of the stats that really popped out for me was 52 total passing yards for the Vikings on just 8 completions, and they only attempted 20 total passes, and they got 1 touchdown on the day. So I think that just speaks to the job that this Oregon defense did defending the pass. That said, I think that it is kind of interesting that we didn't see any sacks from this Oregon defense in their debut game of the season, their season opener. Brian Moore with a question here, worried about the 0 sacks. I don't think I'm worried about it long-term because we still haven't seen them go against a top opponent. That being said, I do remember on the preview podcast, I said that I'm hoping for or expecting even 3, 4, 5 sacks. The Ducks did register some tackles for loss in this game. They had 3 tackles for loss, those coming from Jordan Birch. Kyrie Jackson had a nice one in the backfield, and Tysheem Johnson as well. So you definitely want to see a little bit more havoc and some chaos at the line of scrimmage from a defensive standpoint, especially against an opponent of Portland State's pedigree, right? You wouldn't expect Oregon to have any kind of problems with an offensive line like Portland State's, but they weren't able to come away with any sacks, which I think it's a little concerning for a week 1 game, but I think we'll have to see what they're really able to do against Texas Tech. I think that they're going to come out in that game playing with their hair on fire. And that's exactly what this staff wants to see is a team that's going to be able to bounce back and say, hey, that was week 1, just kind of still gelling and getting into a groove with everything. Let's see how we can do in week 2 against Texas Tech. So I think I'm worried about it in the box of this one game. It definitely doesn't make sense that they weren't able to get any sacks on the Portland State quarterback, Dante Chasseray. But it is what it is. I think that it's concerning because that was the biggest area of concern, I think, for a lot of Oregon fans watching this team play in 2022 and just really underachieving in that regard. But at the end of the day, it was a really dominant performance by the defense from a stat standpoint and just what numbers they were able to put up. So I think that's at least something we can kind of be happy about, or some good kind of takeaway for this team. Looking at some of the stat leaders, Connor Sowelli had 5 total tackles on the day to pace the Oregon defense, and he was followed with a number of guys that had 4, Tyshim Johnson, Jeffrey Bassa, Kamari Terrell, and Bryce Betcher, the former walk-on 2-sport athlete that's also a baseball star. He actually got the starting nod at inside linebacker, probably because we didn't see Justin Jacobs, but either way, he has a great story that you love to see. Oleg with a question, what scheme are they running defensively? Seemed like a 4-2-5. Yeah, that is what Oregon's running this year. At least that's their base package is a 4-2-5. I know Dan Lanning has talked in the past about liking to be a defense that has multiple looks or multiple sets. So I think we could see that change a little bit. But as of right now, that is going to be Oregon's primary defensive scheme is 4 down linemen, 2 linebackers, and 5 defensive backs. And I think that puts more pressure on the linebackers to be good, but I also like it because it allows the defensive backs to really be versatile and fly around, which is something that I think they're more than capable of doing with some of the guys that they brought in, like Evan Williams and Tyshim Johnson and Kyrie Jackson. And Kamari Terrell is a younger guy that's up and coming on this Oregon roster. Okay, what else can we talk about with this Oregon defense? They allowed 148 yards rushing on 37 carries with a long of 22, but they only had 1 scoring drive. So I think from a stat standpoint, from a score standpoint, you saw Oregon check that box of being dominant. But I think what a lot of fans here are saying in the chat and kind of taking away from this game is that the Ducks didn't have as dominant of a game as we expected from a pass rushing standpoint, from a tackles for loss standpoint, just being in the backfield. So while that's not the greatest development, again, for as good of a game as this was in other regards, maybe isn't as good in some regards, like this defensive performance that we saw, but it is just the first week of the season. So in the same regard, what I'm saying is that you can't get too high from the highs. You can't get too low from the lows, but I would think that this defensive staff is probably laying into them a bit just about what they were able to do getting after the quarterback. So that was a bit of a bummer in terms of what we saw from the Ducks in week 1. You did see them have a really good performance on 3rd down, which I think is a good takeaway for Oregon's defense in this game. The Portland State Vikings were just 4 for 15 on 3rd down. So this defense was able to more or less get off the field when they needed to. That's a 26.67% conversion rate. So I think that's a good step in the right direction. Nobody had an overly impressive performance on defense. I think I really like what I saw from Ole Miss transfer defensive back Tyshim Johnson. He was kind of flying all over the field, and I think that was good to see. He had, like I said, a tackle for loss. He had a pass defended, a pass deflection. Kamari Terrell also had a pass deflection, and so did Brandon Dorless. So important to have guys that are being active at the line of scrimmage. Nico Reed had 2 passes defended, as did Dalen Austin and Tyler Turner. So you got to see a lot of young guys get important playing time in their debuts Dalen Austin and Tyler Turner were some of the guys that they signed in the secondary in the 2023 recruiting class. And then Nico Reed, the Colorado transfer, playing some nickel for the Ducks here early on in 2023. So really not a whole lot to say. I think that the defense had the more surprising performance compared to the offense. I think that is kind of one of our broad strokes takeaways from Oregon in week one. The Ducks dominated on offense as we expected, maybe not as dominant as we expected for them on defense, which is an area that they need to continue growing in. They certainly have the talent to do that. I think when you see a performance like this, it's important to remind yourselves that there's a lot of new faces, so they obviously need to gel together and just learn how to play off of each other. But at the same time, I think that Dan Lanning and the rest of this Oregon coaching staff, they have a little bit of a shorter leash in terms of what's going to be tolerated from a defensive standpoint. And it's not like any of the coaches care what my opinion is on this, but they know that the defense was definitely a perceived weakness from the fan base last year. So now you're in year 2 with this coaching staff, you're in year 2 with this scheme, and you have a lot of really good pieces that come in from the transfer portal. So there's expectations that you're going to be able to have one of the best defenses in all of college football. And if the Ducks want to win the Pac-12, get back to the Pac-12 title game and return to the playoff like Josh Pate predicted that they were going to do, I know that was a topic that had a lot of people buzzing last week, then they're going to have to make strides on defense. So you can't get too high on the highs and you can't get too low on the lows is basically what I'm saying. But I agree with what people are saying about this defense leaving a little bit to be desired. All right, let's open it up to a little bit of mailbag here. Let's see here. Oregon football mailbag. Okay, so Bud has a great question. Bud is one of our everydayers, and he also listens to the pod, views the pod on YouTube, sends me some DMs with questions. So really appreciate it. Kind of going a little bit big picture here. Mailbag, what is the impact of Colorado's win over TCU and the surrounding hype around Deion Sanders on the emphasis on the transfer portal over recruiting high school athletes? So there's a couple of different, areas of this question, but I really like the question. Starting things off, Colorado was able to come away with a big win over TCU to start off the 2023 season, to start off the Deion Sanders era, 45-42 on the road in Fort Worth to take down the Horned Frogs, who made it to the national title game last year. So I think that there's a couple ways you can go with this. I think the win for Colorado is a huge win. There's no other way to put this. I don't think that they would really have been competitive in a game like this if Deion Sanders hadn't come in and they hadn't gotten the guys that they did from the transfer portal. I think that it's just a statement win. You couldn't ask for a better way to start the Deion Sanders era, the Coach Prime era in Boulder. His son, Shedeur Sanders, was 38 for 47 with 510 yards and 4 touchdowns. Dylan Edwards had 5 receptions for 135 yards and 3 touchdowns. And then Travis Hunter, have yourself a day as a wide receiver and as a defensive back. Had some great plays on both sides of the ball. So I think it's generating a lot of hype. It's good for Colorado. It's great for Deion Sanders. But at the same time, I think I saw someone say that TCU only had 3 returning starters in entirety in total. So you can't take too much away from one game. And Colorado brought in so many players from the transfer portal. I'm not trying to take away from the win at all. I'm just trying to kind of quantify it a little bit. Make no mistake about it. This is a huge win for Colorado and what they're going to be able to do in 2023. I think it adds to the intrigue of their program, and it's going to be fun to see what they're able to do here in 2023 under Deion Sanders. Next week, they're going to be playing at home at Folsom Field to kick off the home opener against the Nebraska Cornhuskers, who I believe lost to Minnesota to open the season. So that should be a great game. Big Ten versus Pac-12, Big Ten versus future Big 12. But I like this win. The impact of Colorado's win, I think it kind of raises some eyebrows. It makes people more interested in what they're going to be able to do this year. It kind of makes you wonder, what's Colorado going to be able to do in a loaded Pac-12? And how about the Pac-12 on opening weekend? The Pac-12, the only conference in all of college football to finish the first week of the season undefeated. That means Cal won. That means Stanford won. Colorado won. Arizona State and Arizona. Heck of an opening weekend for the Pac-12. Let me get back to the second part of this question from Bud. The surrounding hype around Deion Sanders on the emphasis on the transfer portal over recruiting high school athletes. So what Deion Sanders did in the transfer portal is pretty remarkable, and it certainly caught a lot of attention from people across the country. Just kind of the way he overhauled this roster, it's similar, if not even more aggressive than what Lincoln Riley did at USC in his first year with the Trojans after coming over from Norman and overhauling that roster with a bunch of Oklahoma players. Deion Sanders did the same thing to a degree with some guys from Jackson State coming over, most notably Shedeur Sanders, his son and his quarterback, and Travis Hunter, kind of the poster child for Deion Sanders as a college head coach. So I think that it just proves that there is a growing emphasis on recruiting players in the transfer portal, and for reasons like this. Deion Sanders got this job, and the money that is surrounding this program right now, that kind of results in pressure, right? You know, hey, you're the guy, you're the one that we think is going to be able to turn this program around. Tremendous vote of faith, vote of confidence in him as a coach. And so far, he is delivering. Sure, he's ruffling some feathers along the way, and I don't agree with how he's doing everything. That's not necessarily how I would do it if I were a head coach. But what I'm saying is there is so much pressure on coaches to win, and to win now. I think that the grace period of how long coaches are able to – the grace period for how much time coaches are given to turn a program around and to generate success early is shrinking. And part of that is because you have the transfer portal. If you have coaches able to go out in the transfer portal and get their guys, get proven production and experienced guys, you're going to see them prioritize in some instances these transfer portal guys over high school recruits. Because why would you take a gamble on a high school recruit if you can just go to the transfer portal and get a guy who's already played a lot of football, already produced at a high level, and he wants to come in and play for your team? So I think what it really shows is that you have to have a healthy balance of both. You have to have transfer portal players and you have to have recruits, because recruiting is the lifeblood of a program. We all know that. It's really cliche at this point, but a big part of recruiting now is the transfer portal. So you can't get overly reliant on the transfer portal, because you're not going to get every single guy that you want out of the portal. You got to continue to have a healthy flow of high school players as well that you can develop over a period of time. Or maybe you don't even need to, quote unquote, develop them right away, because they're so good that they just play from the jump. So really like this question from Bud, and I'm going to be super interested to see what Colorado can do under Deion as we keep going in the 2023 season. I got some of my buddies in my group chat saying, "Oh, Max, Colorado's coming for Oregon. You got to watch out." Kylie Hudson, what's good, Max? Go Ducks. What's going on, Kylie? Thanks for being here. Fun to get a week 1 win under their belts for Oregon. Got a question from Johnny the K. Question is, what will we see differently from the Ducks in their game against Texas Tech? Yeah, so that's kind of what everyone's wondering right now, right? Going into this week, Texas Tech lost their week 1 opener on the road, I believe it was, in Laramie, 35-33 final overtime, as the Cowboys come away with a big win. Former Oregon quarterback Tyler Shuck, 31 of 47 passing for 338 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 interception to kick off the 2023 season. So I think one thing that we're going to see differently from the Ducks in this game against Texas Tech in week 2, I fully expect that we're going to see more of Bo Nix running the ball. This is probably one of the most underrated non-conference games in college football in the country, as the Ducks prepare to hit the road in week 2, but they're being overshadowed by games like Florida State and Clemson, Texas and Alabama. There are some other really big games on the slate in week 2. I want to say Ohio State and Notre Dame play. So this is a game that I don't think Oregon's going to be taking lightly at all. Dan Lanning knows that Tyler Shuck's a confident quarterback who has command of that offense that the Red Raiders are operating out there in Lubbock. So I think you're probably going to see, I don't know. I think so. Yeah, Bo Nix running the ball would definitely be one. I think you just have to fully utilize every aspect of his game if you're going to come away with a win against a team like Texas Tech. And Texas Tech wasn't really able to run the ball too well. Their leading rusher was Taj Brooks with 11 carries for 39 yards and a touchdown. I think that kind of makes them vulnerable. Defending the run was a strength for Oregon last year. I think one thing that Oregon fans certainly hope to see differently from the Ducks against Texas Tech is their pass rush. If they're going to be able to get some sacks, I think that's certainly what you want to do, or at least just cause some havoc, get some hits on Tyler Shuck in that game, just so you can kind of rattle him and prevent him from settling in, because Texas Tech's playing at home. They have that home field advantage. They have a great environment. I think that Texas Tech is definitely one of the less popular programs in the state of Texas. When you have UT, you have Texas A&M, you have Baylor, who lost to Texas State over the weekend. Holy crap, that was pretty insane. So Texas Tech is a game that they can't take lightly, and I think you're going to see an improved pass rush, and I think you're going to see Bo Nix use his legs. I think you're going to see more of Bucky Irving probably, because he only registered 4 carries in that game. Duck fans are hoping that Noah Whittington will play in that one, but great question. CT said our defense is still suspect, not really impressed. Said so sack, but probably no sacks. Yeah, I think that until Oregon's defense shows that they can do something consistently, whether that be throughout the entirety of a game or throughout the entirety of multiple games, or like, a stretch, if they're able to get like 4 or 5 sacks 3 games in a row, then I think we can kind of say, okay, Oregon's got a solid pass rush. And I think that that's really all they need right now is a solid pass rush. You don't need an elite pass rush. Sure, that's what they want. Sure, that's what they're shooting for at the end of the day, but you just need to have a good pass rush, considering how it just really wasn't that great last year, and it wasn't a difference maker for them when it came down to crunch time and when games were on the line. Exploring with Ben and Sam says a lot less worried about Tech now that they lost to the Cowboys. Texas Tech got off to a hot start in this game, you guys. They finished the first quarter with a lead 17-0, and then they got shut out in the second quarter, and it was 17-10 at halftime. Didn't score in the third quarter. Wyoming got 7 points, and then they both got a field goal in the fourth. So just a crazy, crazy game for Texas Tech, but I would tend to agree a little bit. I mean, no one probably expected Texas Tech to have too many problems with Wyoming. I think that they're a school that really hasn't been in the national spotlight or really in the national conversation at all since Josh Allen went there. And, Oregon got a really good win, and they dominated Wyoming when Josh Allen played in that game. But they're a team in the Mountain West that shouldn't be slept on, I guess, after this win. But I think losing to Wyoming definitely put a little bit of a ding in the Texas Tech armor. They do have a really, really experienced defense. That defense is loaded with seniors. So that just to the effect of saying that you can't take any matchup lightly. But I am a little bit less worried about Texas Tech. I wouldn't say a lot less worried, but I'd say a little bit less worried about Texas Tech. I don't think that they can take this game lightly. And just because they lost to Wyoming doesn't mean that Oregon should get complacent or take that one lightly at all. All right, what else do we have here? Darius P. said, my concern is Bossa still. Saw him get beat several times by the back out of the backfield on wheel routes. Texas Tech will exploit that early. Yeah, Jeffrey Bossa is definitely going to be important in what Oregon's going to be able to do on defense this year. And I think that that's obviously not something that is encouraging to see from a defensive standpoint, seeing that he is one of the guys that is a better pass coverage guy, one of the better defenders for Oregon when it comes to slowing down the pass. So I think that they're going to be able to – he's still probably growing into that body a little bit, right? He did bulk up over the offseason. So that said, you would like to see him moving a little bit more comfortably for sure. But I think that it's just one game, but he is definitely the guy that you would think is going to be the most capable of doing stuff like that, like covering the running back out of the backfield on wheel routes. So I'm sure that's something that you're going to have to hone in on and film this week if you're Jeffrey Bossa and this Oregon defense, without a doubt. Hey, we got about 37, 40 people here in the live chat. So do me a quick favor, you guys, before I get to the next mailbag question/comment. Hit the like button on the stream and subscribe to the channel as I continue to build this awesome Oregon football community here on YouTube and on the Ducks Dish podcast. So just wanted to make sure to give you guys a friendly reminder, like the video for your boy. All right, we got another one from Bud Everts. JPJ should get an assist for Jordan James' touchdown. I totally agree. I think that was just a funny one to watch. You saw Jordan James bounce it to the outside, and then by the time Jackson Powers Johnson snapped the ball and kind of got around to pulling and trying to get his hands on a couple of guys, he saw Jordan James coming around, and he was like, oh, shoot. I'm kind of in the middle of this play, and I'm starting to get knocked over, but my momentum's taking me, so just got to carry him around. I think he should definitely get an assist for that Jordan James touchdown run. One of 3 touchdown runs that Jordan James had to open the season for the Ducks against Portland State. L5D, L5D is the commenter here. Gary Bryant, wide receiver 2 behind Troy. He very well could be. Like I was trying to tell you guys, people were telling me that Gary Bryant Jr. is unbelievably talented. I think that he is someone who really flew under the radar this offseason. Even as a recruit in the transfer portal, you saw Oregon involved, you saw Texas A&M involved. I want to say Miami was involved, and so was Arizona. Gary Bryant Jr., I think, is just a perfect example or a really good case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. He had, I want to say, let me look up his stats while he was at USC. When Gary Bryant was at USC, he was there, and Clay Helton was the head coach. So in 2022, he redshirted for the Trojans. So you didn't really get to see him do that much. But in 2021, he played in 10 games, had 44 catches for 579 yards and 7 touchdowns, averaging 13.2 yards a catch and just under 58 yards per game. So Gary Bryant Jr. is, I think, one of the more valuable pieces that the Ducks were able to get in the transfer portal, because Lincoln Riley came over from Oklahoma and he brought Mario Williams. He got Jordan Addison out of the transfer portal, got Brendan Rice. I mean, USC has a scary, scary deep wide receiver room. That's no secret. You don't need me to tell you that. But Oregon's looking at their wide receiver room and they're saying, hey, I mean, I don't know. We got a pretty deep room ourselves. So Gary Bryant Jr. was good. He was good at USC, but I guess he just wasn't good enough necessarily in the eyes of Lincoln Riley. As we all know, he redshirted in 2022. So talk about a guy who's probably playing with a chip on his shoulder. I mean, I'm not saying this is what was outwardly said by Lincoln Riley, but you guys can kind of read between the lines. If I'm Gary Bryant, I'm saying, hey, they didn't think I was good enough over there at USC. I'm going to go put a hurting on them in the Pac-12 at Oregon. And, oh, don't forget, Gary Bryant Jr. can stick around if he wants in 2024 when the Ducks follow, or should I say go with USC in tandem as a duo to the Pac-12 or the Big Ten, excuse me. So Gary Bryant Jr. could very well become Oregon's wide receiver 2 in 2023. He is off to a hot touchdowns and looks like he has a good little rhythm with Bo Nix here to start the year. So we'll have to see who emerges as wide receiver 2 behind Troy Franklin. I think a lot of people probably thought it was going to be Chris Hudson if you're just going off of last year's roster, but now you have Gary Bryant who comes in from the portal. You have Trayshawn Holden who comes in from the portal, and Tez Johnson who comes in from the portal. I think that Bryant and Johnson are those twitchy, explosive, speedy guys. And then Trayshawn is a guy who can do a little bit of everything. He's your big body wide receiver at like 6'2", 6'3", 215. Didn't see too much of him against Portland State. I would expect that he gets his number called a bit more against Texas Tech. Let's see what else we got here. Darius P with a question. D-line was getting pushed back consistently. They need to get more physical. What happened to Hill at backer? Did not see much of him. Yeah, you didn't see a whole lot of Jamal Hill in week one against Portland State. They're still kind of trying to work out their linebacker rotation. Um, let's see, Jamal Hill, he recorded one solo tackle, and that was all. That was his main stat that he recorded in the opener. You did see a lot of Devin Jackson. You saw a lot of Bryce Betcher. So especially when Justin Jacobs doesn't play, you probably expected to see a little bit more of Jamal Hill. But maybe I don't know, maybe they just wanted to hold him out and kind of keep him fresh because they were able to do some decent things on defense without putting in a lot of their starters. A lot of backups played some really good snaps. So we'll have to see. Austin Dwyer commented, can't get any sacks against the QB that only has 20 super short, quick throwing attempts all game. Not one single long developing passing play for our guys to have time to get to him. Yeah, so I think that that's definitely a great point, Austin, as far as just you kind of have to temper your expectations for an Oregon pass rush or for any team's pass rush when you're going against a guy who is getting the ball out quickly and in a hurry. And I think that that also just speaks to what the defense is able to do from the secondary standpoint, just being able to get some quality tackles and try to bottle these guys up. Aside from that long scoring drive, I think they did a really good job of keeping the Portland State offense bottled up for the most part. But when a guy's getting the ball out as quickly as the Portland State quarterbacks were, I think it can make it hard to get to him. And is part of the reason we should kind of temper a little bit of our not expectations by any means, but just temper a little bit of what we're saying about this pass rush. And Bud has a perfect comment right here: insufficient sample size to make observations, should not make conclusions. I think that's a great way to kind of wrap your head around this game and what Oregon was able to do. Raymond says, you will know more after we play Texas Tech. If we keep the Red Raiders under 20 points, would that be enough for a defensive statement? Yeah, I think that would be a great defensive statement if they're able to do that. I'm trying to look up what the Texas Red Raiders had as an overall offense in 2022. So give me a second while I pull that up. So Texas Tech averaged 34.23 points per game and 445. Oh, no, that's total points in the year. 34.23 points per game. And as far as total offense, they averaged 461 yards per game. So I think if you can keep Texas Tech under 20 points, I think that would be a great statement. I think kind of early thoughts on this game, I think Oregon's defense should at least be able to put up 30. So if Oregon's offense, can put up 30, if their defense can hold Texas Tech to under 20 points, then I think you're looking at a great defensive statement for sure. And so I think that that's kind of a good barometer and maybe a good place to start what we expect Oregon's defense to do in this game against Texas Tech. But they're going to have their hands full, and I'm going to start doing some more research on what this opposing offense looks like for Tyler Shuck, Joey McGuire, and the Red Raiders. Trevor with a comment after watching Texas Tech, even though it's in their house, big deal. I think Oregon wins by at least 2 scores. Could be more of a beatdown, and I think they are capable. Yeah, I think Oregon is definitely capable of doing this. It's always hard to predict or project blowouts or a beatdown on the road. I think that's one of the reasons I'm so excited about this Texas Tech game is that Oregon gets a tune-up game a little bit against Portland State. Dan Lanning even said they weren't really that tested. So it's hard to take too much away from that, but it's nice to open the season after last year when you opened it against Georgia. But now you get a legitimate road test against a quality opponent, Power 5 opponent in the Big 12. And it's going to teach you a little bit about what this team is going to be able to do for the rest of the season because they have some really tough road games. You have to hit the road to Seattle to play Huskies with Michael Penix and Kalen DeBoer. You have to go to Salt Lake City to play Cam Rising. Possibly he's recovering from a torn ACL in the Rose Bowl and didn't play against the Gators. So maybe it's Bryson Barnes, but you have to hit the road to Salt Lake City to Rice Eccles Stadium to play Kyle Whittingham and the Utah Utes, who are always well coached. So the fact that Oregon gets a quality road test against a good team week 2 of the season, I think is great because it'll show us what this team looks like if their backs are against the wall, if they're playing in a hostile environment, and how they respond to adversity. I think that goes a long way. That's why I was so happy to see this team win against Washington State on the road last year in Pullman. Washington State is like the most Pac-12 after dark school that we've probably ever seen. Excuse me. And they have a quality quarterback in Cam Ward. So for them to be able to come back and win that game on the road was a tremendous statement. And I think this Texas Tech game is Oregon's first opportunity at a statement game for sure in 2023. And I talked about that in one of my recent podcasts, which was titled Oregon's Toughest Games in 2023. So we'll see if the Ducks can make a statement against Texas Tech this coming weekend with the Red Raiders on deck. Devi House with the question that we got here. Which freshman impressed you the most? Yeah, I think as far as what we saw from the Ducks on Saturday in their season opener, probably talking about true freshmen, I assume, with this question. I think you can start with Kenyon Sadiq, Dante Dowdell, and Jaden Lamar. I really liked what I saw from them. I was trying to look at the condensed game highlights just to see what we could see later on from some of these younger guys that got in the game. But I think Dante Dowdell runs really tough. I think that it was fun to see just some of his traits in the run game as a tough runner. Just watching his highlights today of the game, and he just still runs tough. I love his running style. I love the way he hits the hole. And he has a lot of explosion. Jaden Lamar looked great. He looks like he's put on some really good weight this offseason since arriving and enrolling early, listed on the roster at 5'11", 200 pounds. Also made a little bit of an impact in the passing game as well, if memory serves. Yeah, 4 catches for 24 yards, 6 yards a pop with a long of 11. So Jaden Lamar, I think, was one of my freshmen that impressed the most in the Week 1 game against the Vikings, because I think he's kind of getting left out of the equation a little bit. I think a lot of people, when you sign a guy like Dante Dowdell out of the state of Mississippi, who was incredibly decorated as a recruit, won the Mississippi Mr. Football Award. Anytime you get a guy like that in the mold of Derrick Henry at 6'2", 210, 215 pounds, I think he's kind of going to steal the show. But Jaden Lamar was a record-setting running back at Lake Stevens High School in Washington, helped lead his team to a state title, the first ever state championship for Lake Stevens as a program. So I think that he really impressed me because he also found the end zone. So for both of Oregon's true freshman running backs to find the end zone in their debuts is great. Dante Dowdell with 8 carries for 55 yards and a touchdown, 6.9 yards per carry. Jaden Lamar, I already talked about what he did through the air, but what he was able to do on the ground to affect the run game. 8 catches for 51 yards and 6.4 yards per pop per carry. I like saying per pop. And 1 touchdown. I think that definitely merits an impressive performance, without a doubt. And Kenyon Sadiq. Can we talk about Kenyon Sadiq? He only registered 1 catch for 9 yards on the day. He almost had a touchdown. He almost had a touchdown, but I just love the explosion that he had on the outside, the athleticism that he showed, the playmaking ability that he showed to dive for the pylon to try and get that touchdown. I think that was a tremendous play from Sadiq, a guy who has some pretty big shoes to step into as a true freshman. I don't believe we saw any of Casey Kelly if we're just looking at the tight end room and what Drew Maringer's group was able to do. Terrence Ferguson and Patrick Herbert both had kind of chunk plays. Terrence Ferguson finished with 3 catches for 26 yards, long of 10, and then Patrick Herbert had 1 catch for 23 yards. So nice to get those guys to improve a little bit. But I think the real question mark with the tight end position lies behind those guys. What's Casey Kelly able to do after coming over from Old Miss? What's Caden Ludwig able to do after coming over from Colorado? And how does Kenyon Sadiq set. How does Kenyon Sadiq kind of fit the mix there as a true freshman? I think if you look at his high school tape, the dude just made crazy plays coming out of the state of Idaho, which is definitely a state that isn't really known for producing blue chip talent. They did produce Gatlin Bear, a star wide receiver here in the 24 class, probably the only guy faster than Roderick Pleasant if you're looking at the national sprinting competition and just the national sprinting picture. He's committed to Boise State to play for Indianapolis and the Broncos. But that said, Kenyon Sadiq was the Gatorade Player of the Year in Idaho. So he was really more of a playmaking wide receiver, I want to say, at the high school level than a well-rounded tight end that was also asked to block. So Drew Marringer talked about how that's kind of where he needs to grow his game. Definitely need to put some weight onto his body, but just the explosiveness that you saw from him, he didn't really look like a tight end. That guy could straight up move. So I really like what I saw from Kenyon Sadiq as well in his debut with the Ducks. So I think that'll do it for us on today's episode of the Ducks Dish Podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to today's episode. Before we get out of here, smash that like button and hit the subscribe button for me as well. And then hit the like button hit the notification bell while you're at it, so you get notified every time I go live, every time I upload a podcast or a press conference from the players and coaches covering Oregon football. And then you can always read my written work over at ducksdigest.com. Important to set those timers, set ththose alarms. 5:30 p.m. Pacific is when Braden Platt is going to be making his college decision between Oregon and Oklahoma. And we will have coverage of that commitment this evening. So make sure you guys keep an eye out on that one. Make sure to follow me on all the social media platforms, on Twitter and Instagram at mtorres sports, on YouTube at Oregon Football Max Torres. Follow the Ducks Digest Instagram at Ducks Digest. I'm going to be posting some awesome pictures from one of my photographers, Darby Winter. He made his Ducks Digest debut and just crushed it. So make sure you guys follow Darby on Twitter and Instagram. I'll be making sure to share his links. But also share the Ducks Dish Podcast with your friends, with your family, and with other Ducks fans. Appreciate you guys for taking some time out of your day to talk some ball, talk some Oregon football. The season is back. I'm so happy, and I can't wait to cover all of it. So appreciate you guys for your support, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Ducks Dish Podcast.